I was gonna bring along some cousins with me on this journey for the very first time. And you ready for this, Kiki? You ready to go?
We're ready to go. Let's go.
All right. You ready, Jolene?
You know, I stay ready.
Oh, okay. Well, then there it is. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up, Tim Sykes, millionaire mentor and trader, here with my laptop, working on my watch list for you. Swipe.
What's next? So we call this in the sense of what to expect for 2021. Now, this is a very simple presentation that we're going to literally 3 slides that we're going to look at, and one of the slides is literally the title. But there's going to be so much information that you're going to gather, so make sure that you have your pen or pencils ready, because we're about to go through a lot, because we're looking at how is it that we can construct 2021 and moving forward as it pertains to planning. You ready?
Yep.
So let's get some of the obvious stuff out of the way. So looking at 2021, we're looking at a road to recovery. So we are so ready to move on from 2020. I think that honestly, I speak on behalf of everybody. Can I say that? 2020, we're done. It's over. We are ready to move on from this relationship. It's so overdone. So then the next thing is we are ready for calm. We are tired of we went through a lot. There was a lot that we had to go through. We had COVID. We also had, you know what? We had a lot. Then but before we move over into 2021 and coming out of 2020, we kind of have to assess a little bit of what the damage is. So what sectors have been hit the hardest? Essentially we can foresee some rebalancing coming into play, some, new players looking to step in and say, hey, I belong here too. We also have some SPACs that have just literally said, hey, you get a SPAC, you get a SPAC, everybody gets a SPAC. Everybody and their mama want to be a SPAC these days. So we also have to deal with that. And then on top of that, we also had industry sectors that were completely decimated. So we're looking at the entire spectrum from left to right. So we keep that in mind. And after you've looked at all that, now it's time to say, okay, hey, what's the new game plan? It's kind of like you get a new principal at the school and everybody wants to know, okay, well, what's this principal's philosophy? Mm-hmm. Or say, for example, you get a new head coach, okay, well, who's that? What's the plan? What's the strategy? Shout outs to head coach Head. So we look at those things as it pertains to how is it that we plan on moving forward. And what better way than to construct a diagram. And so with this diagram, we have a few things in which that we look at. We look at it by a few things. So here are some rules to this and how 2021 will work, especially when it comes to your portfolio or how is that you construct, and even going through the 31 SIPs. And if you have any extra SIPs, which that's good for you, stay hydrated, congratulations. Though it helps you narrow it down so that way you can actually see things a little bit more clear. So for example, we look at fundamentals, we look at technicals, we look at the economics, and what is the impact? Now, the interesting thing about that is that this is kind of like the basic checklist for whenever you're looking at a stock. Kiki, what do you think?
I love it. You got fundamentals, you got technicals. You got everything right here, all in one. It's like a little sneak peek.
It's just a sneak peek. It's just a sneak peek. So then we also have okay, now we go into, okay, after we looked into that checklist, then we go into, okay, from there, all right, who are the sectors in which that I consider my favorite? Now, me going into next year, it's I like 4 sectors. I like technology, consumer discretionary, industrials, and healthcare. Why do I like them? Well, for tech, for anybody that knows me, duh. Consumer discretionary, another duh item. Industrials, I see a lot of upside and a lot of recovery there, especially under a new administration, along with a few other things. And then on top of that, we see healthcare, because, healthcare is kind of like the little sleeper, but every now and then when I want to wake up, it's just full of energy, and then it just goes back to taking a nap. Yeah, that's the reason why I like healthcare. And then, so after we look at our sectors, you picked your sectors. we look at the next thing, which we go all the way back diagonally through the box. So we're going to come back over here. So we say, well, who are the winners? Who are the losers? And then who are those backups? And then who's just plain old toxic? Like, for example, if we look at a sector, like remember, Jolene says that there are 11 sectors. So we could probably pick who the winners are. We know who the losers are. And it's not the fact that they're like just super bad. It's just like, hey, this just isn't your year. I mean, you know, I'm a New England Patriots fan, and this just isn't our year. But, you know, if you look at my other fandom, I'm a, you know, LeBron James, Lakers fan. Shout outs to you, LeBron James, just shameless plug. I also want to say that they were winners. So when we think about it as it pertains to industry sectors, who would be some of, say, for example, those winners? Well, this year it was all about technology, consumer discretionary, and then industrials and healthcare definitely did their thing. So we also had some sleepers in there like materials. Now, who are some of those losers? I'm glad that you asked. Has anybody heard of financials lately? Oh, okay. No? All right. So we're going to just sip on that. Hey, Kiki, do you know of any other losing sectors out there that we should know about? Oh, okay. Well, Jolene? Oh, we just all sipping today and just looking away. All right.
I mean, we talk the ones that never pop up in the sector.
Energy. Energy every now and then makes a run, and then ultimately they just retreat back. We also have consumer staples in which that, materials. Real estate, you know. All right, so then who are the backups? The backups are essentially like, you know, they can kind of like, you know, surprise you every now and then. You know, they can come off the bench, give you a little bit of, you know, activity, a little bit of something, productivity. So that's where we look at it. For me, I look at it, here's how I see it. I see my technology and consumer discretionary as definitely my winners. And then I definitely see my industrials and my healthcare as backups.
Yep.
So just in case if technology and consumer discretionary, if you having a bad night, industrial, I'm gonna need you and healthcare to get it in together. We need these returns. So step up to the plate. So those are essentially my backups. Now the folks in whom that are toxic. Yeah, so let's define that. Let's break it down between losing sectors or losing companies, and let's say just straight up toxic, like, you got to be out your rabbit mind to literally even touch this. So for example, if we look at a losing company this year, I would say, and let's just give you an example even within the tech space. A losing company this year would probably be considered like an Intel. Oh.
Put on your shades. That shade caught me off guard though.
Now, a toxic company that we need to stay away from.
NKLA.
You already know. Go ahead and say it again for the group. Can we say it again for the class? Like, because just in case they can't hear you out there in the stands.
NKLA. Stay away.
Yes. Stay away. So another toxic company that we heard about this year that was going bankrupt, but everybody wanted to like pump as much money into it.
It hurt so bad.
It hurts so bad. That is worse than a headache. No Tylenol could have fixed that one. That was just, So then when we think about another losing company this year, we could say, for example, an Uber. Now, of course, it's like I'm laughing at my own pain because, of course, I mean, I wasn't optimistic on Nikola or Hertz at all, or even Kodak.
Yo.
Okay, so we're gonna let them live a little bit. Like we're gonna let them just, let them.
Or are we?
We're gonna let them live, because if you were trading in any of these companies with any type of optimism, then you definitely needed to have several seats. All right, so essentially those were the toxic companies. And then of course you had some losing companies. Like for example, Intel, they're still a good company. The only thing is they just got too cocky. And you know what I always say, never let your cockiness supersede your talent.
Okay.
So then we also had, Uber. in which that, again, good company, some interesting, framework. They had to sell off assets though in order to essentially really keep themselves afloat. And they also try to buy, I think it was Grubhub or DoorDash, and that just ended terribly. So you just had a bad year. But we're actually thinking that there may be some signs of promise as the economy maybe starts to roar back, and there's some other opportunities that may present itself. But I feel bad for them because they sold their drone company, but that's just a whole nother other.
Man.
But I'm gonna leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna leave it alone. So, all right. So now we understand the differentiation between a losing company versus a toxic company. And if you ever need a recap, we actually did a 60-second video throughout the year that said a damaged stock between a damaged company.
Different.
Very much so different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, apparently, I'm just gonna call it what it is because I have no problem in calling myself out.
Okay.
I did call out GE as a damaged company. Now, do I still think that they're damaged? Yes, I definitely think that they're damaged, but ultimately, at the same token, they've been showing signs of life. So, once upon a time, AMD was a damaged company, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy, and look at them today, now hitting a new 52-week high, and ultimately, challenging little boy blue. So anything can change within this market. One day you could be a millionaire, and then all of a sudden, the very next day, you just had a bad turn. All right, so that's what we look at when we say damage, or losing company versus toxic company. And you can look at the same thing as it pertains to the sectors. The way I always see it is start from the macro side, so where you look at it from the industry or the sector. And then on top of that, now it allows you to narrow in a little bit more focus to look at the companies much more specifically. All right, so Kiki, I just feel I would feel remiss if I didn't give you any of your shine tonight, where you could talk a little bit about, say, for example, some of the factors, which could also be risks. So can you explain a little bit of this last little quadrant section that we have here?
Yeah, so I learned a little bit about these risk factors earlier today. So this geopolitics, guys, I actually had that in a sector for a big risk. I actually wrote it down, so let me reference back to my notes.
All the way into notes.
Yes, the energy sector. That could be a really big risk when it comes to the energy sector.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have economic factors, well, the economy. So let's just say if the economy is going down, what sector is going to, have a risk from that, like a recession? Industrials.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that too. The state of the consumer. So basically, if we're going in the state of the consumer, if you put a product out and your consumers aren't willing to buy it, or they're just like, nah, that's not for us, that could potentially fall into, I would say tech, but not necessarily tech. Because if they come out with something like a product, let's say the drones, I'm trying to make sure I get this right, consumer discretionary. So you got drone services that's coming out. If people don't want, invasion of privacy, there's your state of the consumer. They don't want no parts of it. So is it going to work? Is it not going to work? So those are just like small intel secrets.
Yes. And then the final one that we have here is definitely trade and GDP. So of course, one of the biggest things that we've been looking at that's also within the state of tech is, say, for example, the trade war. Where is it that we sit here? What companies could be impacted? Now, it's kind of interesting because when we start to look at, say, for example, risk factors, it really starts to put it into perspective. So as you move forward and going into next year, and when you start to pick out your strategy and plan, here's how you look at it. Start with the fundamentals and the technicals and the economics and the impact. So when we look at the economics and the impact, it's pretty much what's happening currently around or that surrounds the company. So how is it impacting the company, or how is it impacting, the other section over there to the far right called sectors? And if it's impacted, how big is that impact? If it's a not so big impact, then it lets you know that, okay, hey, there could be some small little headwinds. But if there's a heavy impact, then that could possibly tell you that we could be possibly in the midst of a hurt, and maybe it's time to possibly step away and let this one show that it could possibly wane off any of that impact first before you actually step in. And then, of course, it's always about identifying the who's who. So think about this, like if 2021 is a party, you want to know, okay, hey, what are the rules of this party first? That's where the first quadrant comes into play. Then on top of that, you want to know exactly like, okay, hey, what's the music like? What's the type of music in which that we're going to be rocking with at this party?
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, you want to know exactly like, okay, from this party, like who's going to be there? Like who's all going to be there, so that way you can kind of line it up at this party. Like, okay, hey, you over there, it's like, yo, you and I aren't rocking well with each other, so we just need to stay over there and I'll stay over here. And then the other part is like, yo, what part could end up stopping this party immediately? So what are the risks? So for example, if certain things come into this party, yo, I don't want to be the last person here, so I'm going to stay attentive, though that I'm having the time of my life, but I'm going to be on somewhat of alert and making sure that any of these come about. Then ultimately, I know that I'm not going to be the last one at this party trying to figure out what is going on. And so that's ultimately how we're going to be looking at 2021. That's ultimately how it looks like when you go into any year. So one of the things that I just did there is I just showed you how to actually examine looking into the year. Now, of course, we're going to have some moments in which that we go in detail, but tonight just isn't going to be it, because we definitely want it to be about, our guest here tonight. So Kiki, we definitely want to hear some of your last and final thoughts before we go into some of our general, our final pieces. So Kiki, you actually get the benediction this evening. So sis, the floor is yours.
Well, guys, I mean, I've learned so much from just Mark and, Jolene overall. I'll tell you guys that patience is something that you really need to work on. I know I told you guys that I'm a sniper and I'm a scalper at heart, but this year I've learned that this long-term contract game is the patience. The money is there. Yeah, you can make money as a day trader, but learning these long-term contracts is where you can make so much money without having to have the extra added stress of, do I have enough time? Is my contract about to expire? So even from patience, you can build on from that and sticking to your plan. I know you guys come on Clubhouse and you're always asking us, hey, should I get out? But it's like, what do you think? What plan did you have before we got on Clubhouse? Did you already know where you were going to get out at? So why are you trying to change up from the plan that you already laid out? So if you guys don't take anything away from this conversation that we had today, sticking to your plan is ultimately where you're going to make all your money. Because as soon as you deviate and your plan continues to carry on, but you